I stared at the laminated card that Director Harris had pressed into my palm during my orientation. 23 years old, fresh out of community college, and already I was questioning every decision that had led me to this moment. The fluorescent lights in the administrative office hummed with an irregular pattern as I read through the list again, trying to convince myself this was normal. "These protocols will keep you alive, Daniel," Harris had said, his weathered face devoid of any humor as he slid the card across the conference table. "Follow them without exception." I traced my finger down the list, pausing at the first entry. Protocol 1. If you encounter a child in a red hospital gown wandering the 4th floor after 2 a.m., do not speak to them. Do not acknowledge their presence. Continue your rounds as if they do not exist. What kind of hospital protocol was that? I had laughed nervously when Harris first presented it, assuming it was some elaborate initiation ritual for new night security personnel. Every workplace had its traditions for testing the newcomers. At my previous job at the grocery store, they had convinced me that I needed to check the parking lot for shopping cart violations every 30 minutes. "This is a joke, correct?" I had asked. Harris had not smiled. "Just follow the protocols, son." The wall clock read 10:45 p.m. I tucked the card into my breast pocket and grabbed my flashlight. Joke or not, I needed this position. The student loans from my associate degree were not going to pay themselves, and security work was the best opportunity I could secure with my limited professional experience. If participating in their tradition was part of the employment, I could manage it. I started my first patrol route, walking past darkened hospital wings with empty gurneys lined against the walls. The facility had closed its outpatient services at 8 p.m., but the cleaning crew was still working, mopping floors, emptying waste receptacles, sanitizing surfaces. Near the 3rd-floor nurses' station, I spotted an elderly woman in a custodial uniform pushing a large utility cart. She looked up as I approached. "You must be the new night security officer," she said, extending her hand. "Patricia Hayes, I handle the overnight sanitation duties." I shook her hand. "Daniel Foster, first night?" Patricia nodded. "Harris has you doing the graveyard shift, does he?" "Difficult assignment for a newcomer." "It is not so bad," I said, though the empty hospital echoed strangely around us. "I am accustomed to being awake late anyway." "Well, you will not see much of me," Patricia said, turning back to her cart. "I am always finished by 11:45 p.m. I do not like being here after midnight." She gave me an odd look. "Never have." I thought about the protocol on my card. "Any particular reason?" Patricia just shrugged. "Place feels different at night, that is all." "Anyway, good meeting you. Good luck with the position." I continued my patrol, making mental notes of emergency exits and security camera positions. By the time I had completed my first full circuit, the cleaning crew had packed up and departed. The hospital was completely empty now, just me and 80,000 square feet of medical space. The clock on my phone read 12:15 a.m. I had been checking it regularly, curious about what would happen after midnight. Nothing seemed different. The same empty corridors, the same quiet hum of the ventilation system, the same soft instrumental music playing over the speakers. I was passing the east wing when I heard it. The squeak of wheels on linoleum floor. I turned and saw a figure at the far end of the hall pushing a utility cart. The custodial uniform was unmistakable. Patricia. Had she not said she always left by 11:45 p.m.? I started to raise my hand in greeting when I remembered the first protocol. The figure moved with strange, jerky motions like someone who did not quite know how their limbs worked. As it came closer, I could see it was definitely Patricia. Same face, same uniform, same build, but something was wrong. The movements were not natural in her eyes. They did not blink. My heart jumped in my chest. This had to be part of the tradition. Harris must have hired an actor to dress up like Patricia and walk around strangely to frighten me. The fake Patricia pushed her utility cart closer, the wheels making that distinctive squeak with each rotation. I kept my eyes forward and walked past, pretending not to see her. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up as I felt her watching me. I kept walking, focusing on the sound of my own footsteps. Behind me, I heard the squeak of the utility cart wheels turning to follow. I quickened my pace slightly, fighting the urge to look back. The squeaking followed me for several more steps, then suddenly stopped. When I finally dared to glance over my shoulder, the corridor was empty. I let out a breath I had not realized I was holding. This was an elaborate tradition, I told myself. But why would Harris go to such lengths? And why did Patricia make that comment about not wanting to be here after midnight? I pulled out the card again, reading the first protocol. The laminated surface felt heavier somehow, more significant. Maybe these protocols were not a joke after all. I tucked the card back into my pocket and continued my patrol, now hyper-aware of every sound in the empty hospital. What other strange things might happen tonight? And more importantly, why did these specific protocols exist in the first place? I continued my patrol through Riverside Medical Center, clutching my flashlight in one hand and the protocol card in the other. The hospital felt even emptier now, with only the soft hum of the air conditioning and the occasional flicker of motion-sensing lights breaking the silence. My encounter with whatever had been pretending to be Patricia left me on edge, making each shadow look like a potential threat. The atrium loomed ahead, its chairs arranged in neat rows like some waiting room frozen in time. I slowed my pace, remembering the second protocol on the card. I pulled it out and read it again. Protocol 2. If you hear a phone ringing in the records room after 1 a.m., do not answer it. If you must enter the room for any reason, unplug every phone you see. Do not listen to any messages left on voicemail systems. I checked my phone. 12:55 a.m., perfect timing. I carefully kept my route away from the records department, taking the long way around through the physical therapy wing. The thought of hearing a phone ring in an empty records room, knowing I should not answer it, made my skin crawl. I had worked in medical administration before. Offices were unsettling enough during daylight hours with their filing cabinets and flickering computer screens. The idea of one that needed to be avoided, that might do something if I went inside. I did not want to find out what would happen. I walked with measured steps, counting the floor tiles, studying the patterns of scuff marks that the cleaning crew had missed. Anything to keep from heading toward the records department. The hallway seemed longer than usual, and I could feel the weight of the silent offices around me as I navigated the detour. My neck muscles tensed with the effort of not thinking about what might be happening in that room right now. I made it through the detour without incident and let out the breath I had been holding. I tucked the protocol card back into my pocket and checked my phone again. 1:12 a.m. I had managed to avoid the records room situation entirely. Maybe there was no phone ringing tonight. The next section of my patrol route took me toward the service elevators. 4 of them stood side by side, their polished metal doors reflecting the dim emergency lighting. I approached slowly, remembering the third protocol. Protocol 3. At 2:30 a.m. you will hear knocking from inside the second elevator. Press the call button 3 times, but do not look inside when the doors open. Walk away immediately. I checked my phone again. 1:50 a.m. I had 40 minutes before the elevator incident was supposed to happen. I decided to complete my patrol of the nearby departments first, keeping an eye on the time. The darkened offices looked peaceful enough. Doors closed and locked. I swept my flashlight across each one, checking for any signs of security breaches or other issues. Nothing out of the ordinary, just the usual displays of medical equipment, filing systems, and computer workstations frozen in time until morning. As I circled back toward the elevators, a cold feeling settled in my stomach. It was 2:28 a.m. 2 minutes until whatever was going to happen with the elevator. I positioned myself about 15 feet from the bank of elevators, watching the second one with growing unease. At exactly 2:30 a.m. I heard it, a knocking sound, methodical and persistent. 3 knocks, pause. 3 knocks, pause. The pattern repeated, coming from inside the elevator shaft. My first instinct was to call maintenance, to report that someone or something was trapped inside. But Harris's warnings and the protocol card in my pocket held me back. The knocking grew louder, more insistent. 3 knocks, pause. 3 knocks, pause. I took a deep breath and approached the elevator, keeping my eyes fixed on the call button. My hand shook as I reached out and pressed it 3 times in rapid succession. The elevator dinged and the door slid open with a soft mechanical whir. I kept my eyes locked on the floor, fighting every natural instinct to look up and check on whatever was making that sound. The knocking changed instantly. What had been a methodical pattern transformed into frenzied pounding, as if dozens of fists were hammering against metal from the inside. The sound was deafening, echoing through the corridor. I took a step back, then another, forcing my legs to work despite the terror freezing my muscles. I turned and walked away, my back to the open elevator. The pounding followed me down the corridor, seeming to come from the walls themselves, surrounding me from all sides. I quickened my pace, not quite running, but moving as fast as I could while still maintaining some semblance of control. My radio crackled to life, making me jump. "Daniel, you there? Everything going okay?" Harris's voice came through, steady and calm. I fumbled with the radio, nearly dropping it as I brought it to my mouth. "Yes," I managed, trying to keep my voice level despite the adrenaline coursing through my system. "Everything is fine." I could still hear the pounding from the elevator, though it was growing fainter as I put distance between us. I was not about to tell Harris I was currently being followed by whatever unholy thing lived in the second elevator. "Good, good," Harris replied, "just checking in. Remember Protocol 4. If you see a doctor in a white coat standing in the surgical wing, leave the building immediately. Do not speak to them. Do not look back. Just get out. Understood?" "Understood," I said, my mouth dry. The radio went silent and I was alone again, with the fading pounding from the elevator and the knowledge that there were still more horrors waiting for me in this hospital. Spotted him at 3:45 in the morning. A man in a white coat standing perfectly still in the center of the surgical wing corridor. He did not move, did not shift, did not even seem to breathe. A surgical mask covered the lower half of his face, but his eyes were visible. Cold, unblinking eyes that seemed to track my movement even though his head remained motionless. Protocol 4 flashed through my mind. If you see a doctor in a white coat standing in the surgical wing, leave the building immediately. Do not speak to them. Do not look back. Just get out. My hand shook as I grabbed my radio. The surgical wing was between me and the main exit. I would need to circle around through the emergency department to avoid passing directly in front of him. "Harris," I said into the radio, trying to keep my voice steady. "There is a doctor in the surgical wing." The radio crackled to life almost immediately. "Get out now." Harris's voice was tight, urgent. "Do not look at him. Just go." I backed away slowly, then turned and walked as fast as I could without running toward the emergency department. The exit was at the far end, about 150 yards away. My footsteps echoed through the empty hospital. The sound seemed to bounce off every surface, announcing my location. I kept my eyes fixed ahead, focusing on the red exit sign glowing in the distance. My breathing felt too loud in my ears. The hallway seemed longer than it had during my earlier patrols. The weight of someone watching pressed against my back. I could feel it, the sensation of eyes boring into me, but I did not turn around. I remembered the protocols. As I reached the halfway point, I heard something that made my skin crawl. The faint sound of footsteps on linoleum somewhere behind me, a measured, unhurried pace. Following, I walked faster. The exit sign grew larger. 75 yards, 50 yards. The footsteps behind me stopped. The silence felt worse somehow from yards. The door was right there. I could see the dark parking lot beyond the glass. I pushed the door open, feeling the cool night air hit my face, and then in that moment of relief, I made a terrible mistake. I glanced back. The doctor had moved. He was standing at the end of the corridor, much closer than he should have been. Even at this distance, I could see his eyes above the surgical mask. They reflected the emergency lighting, two perfect circles of light like an animal caught in headlights. I stumbled through the door and let it swing shut behind me. The parking lot was empty except for my car and Harris's sedan at the far end. I ran to my car, fumbling with my keys, dropping them once before managing to unlock the door. Once inside, I locked all the doors and started the engine. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely grip the steering wheel. I pulled out my phone and called Harris. He answered on the first ring. "Are you out?" "Yes," I said, my voice cracking. "I am in the parking lot. Did you look back?" His voice was flat. I swallowed. "Yes." Harris was quiet for a moment. "Go home. I will come in early to check things out." "What was that thing?" I asked. "What are any of these things? The fake Patricia, the phone, the elevator, the doctor?" "I do not know," Harris cut me off. "I have worked here 12 years and I still do not know what they are. I just know the protocols keep people safe. Go home, Daniel. Get some sleep. I will see you tomorrow night." He hung up before I could ask anything else. I drove home in a daze, checking my rearview mirror every few seconds, half expecting to see those reflective eyes staring back at me. When I got to my apartment, I double-checked all the locks and left the lights on while I tried to sleep. The next evening, I arrived for my shift 20 minutes early. Harris was waiting in the administrative office, looking tired. "Everything is back to normal," he said as soon as I walked in. "Whatever that thing was, it's gone now. At least until the next time." "I cannot do this," I said. This job is insane, terrifying. Yes, I know, Harris rubbed his eyes. Look, if you want to quit, I understand. Most people do not last more than a week once they see what is really going on here. I wanted to quit. I should have quit. But rent was due in 3 weeks and my bank account was nearly empty. Finding another night job that paid this well would take time I did not have. I will stick with it, I said finally. But I am following the protocols exactly. Harris nodded. That is all any of us can do. Over the next few weeks, I got better at navigating the hospital's supernatural residents. I learned to patrol certain areas before specific times to avoid encounters. I memorized all the protocols and kept the card folded in my pocket at all times. I still saw the fake Patricia most nights, pushing her squeaky utility cart through the corridors after midnight. I still avoided the records room after 1 in the morning to prevent hearing the ringing phone. I still pressed the elevator button at 2:30 a.m. without looking inside when the doors opened. But I never saw the doctor again. Harris told me that was normal. Some of the entities appeared regularly, others only occasionally. I started bringing a thermos of coffee and extra batteries for my flashlight. I downloaded podcasts to listen to during the quiet hours when nothing strange happened. I even began to develop a routine, marking off sections of the hospital on my mental checklist as I completed each patrol. The fear never completely went away. I still jumped at unexpected sounds. I still felt my heart race whenever I had to follow one of the protocols. But the terror became more manageable. A low hum of anxiety rather than the paralyzing dread I had felt those first few nights. It was like living with a chronic illness. You never get used to it, not really. But you learn to function despite it. You adapt because you have to. And so I did. Night after night, I returned to the hospital with its impossible residents, following the protocols that kept me alive until morning. 4 months had passed since I started working as a night security officer at Riverside Medical Center. The job that had once filled me with dread had become just another routine. My nights followed a predictable pattern. Patrol routes timed to avoid the strange entities that haunted the hospital after hours. I had gotten used to ignoring the fake Patricia as she pushed her squeaky utility cart around after midnight. I kept away from the records room after 1 a.m. to avoid hearing any ringing phones. At 2:30 a.m., I dutifully pressed the second elevator button 3 times when I heard the knocking, but never looked inside when the doors opened. The doctor had not reappeared since that first night, which Harris said was normal. Some entities showed up less frequently than others. The fear had not completely gone away. It had just changed shape from paralyzing terror to a dull background anxiety I could function around. I developed little coping mechanisms, downloaded podcasts for the quiet hours, brought a thermos of coffee to avoid using the break room alone, and kept extra batteries for my flashlight. I even had a mental checklist for each patrol route. What I had not figured out was what these things actually were. Harris was not much help. Whenever I asked, he just shrugged and said, "Does it matter? The protocols keep us safe." But it did matter to me. I wanted to understand why I was avoiding eye contact with custodians and ignoring doctors. Were they ghosts, demons, something else? And why did they follow such specific patterns? I was on my 3 a.m. patrol, having just dealt with the elevator incident, when I noticed something odd near the mechanical room. A door that was always locked stood slightly ajar. The basement access entrance. In 4 months, I had never seen it open. I stopped and stared at it for a moment. Protocol said I should radio Harris about any security breaches, but Harris was off tonight. His first vacation day in the 12 years he had worked here, according to him. I had been left alone to handle the shift. I weighed my options. I could call Harris at home, but he had sounded exhausted on the phone earlier. Besides, it was probably just someone forgetting to lock up. Maybe the real Patricia before she left for the night. I will just check it out quickly, I muttered to myself, pushing the door open wider. The beam of my flashlight cut through the darkness, revealing a concrete staircase that descended steeply downward. The air smelled damp and metallic. I took a few cautious steps inside, letting the door rest against my foot to prevent it from closing completely. The basement ran beneath the entire hospital, connecting utilities and providing access to the underside of the building systems. I had seen it on the facility schematics, but never had a reason to come down here. As I moved deeper, my flashlight beam caught something on the wall. I stepped closer, frowning. Strange markings had been drawn directly onto the concrete, symbols I did not recognize. They looked like they had been made with red paint or something else that had dried a dark rust brown color. I followed the markings, descending the stairs, and then stopped dead in my tracks. My flashlight illuminated what could only be described as a shrine. It was built into a small alcove in the wall, a shelf-like space that had been decorated with candles, dried flowers, and what looked like personal items. But what made my blood run cold were the identification badges arranged in a semicircle, hospital security badges, at least 15 of them. I stepped closer, my hand shaking slightly as I directed the beam of my flashlight across the display. I recognized some of the names from stories Harris had told. Guards who had quit suddenly or could not handle the night shift. Jennifer Williams, Robert Chen, Marcus Anderson, all former night guards according to Harris. My mind raced trying to make sense of what I was seeing. Why would someone collect old security badges and create this bizarre shrine? Was this connected to the entities somehow? A soft scraping sound from deeper in the basement made me freeze. I held my breath, listening. Another scrape followed by what sounded like footsteps, slow, uneven footsteps coming toward me. I did not wait to see what was making the noise. I backed away quickly, then turned and half walked, half ran back the way I had come. I pushed through the basement door, made sure it was firmly shut, and leaned against it, heart pounding. Just a rat, I told myself, trying to steady my breathing. Or a pipe settling. But I did not believe it. Not after everything I had seen in this place. I needed to continue my patrol. I would tell Harris about the shrine when he came back. He might know what it meant. I turned away from the basement door and headed toward the main lobby. And stopped dead in my tracks. They were all there. All of them gathered together in the open area of the main lobby. The fake Patricia stood motionless, her utility cart beside her, hands gripping the handle with unnatural stillness. A child in a red hospital gown that I had never seen before stood next to her, staring at me with empty eyes. The doctor from the surgical wing stood there too, his white coat pristine, his eyes reflecting my flashlight beam. And sitting on one of the lobby chairs was a figure I had only heard about in the protocols, but never encountered. A nurse in an old-fashioned uniform, her face pale and expressionless, all of them together. Staring directly at me. This was not supposed to happen. The entities never appeared together. They had their own times, their own places, their own protocols. I stood frozen, unable to look away as the four figures began to move toward me with jerky, synchronized steps. I ran. I sprinted down the corridor with my heart hammering in my chest, the sound of my footsteps echoing off the walls. Behind me, the four entities moved in perfect synchronization, their jerky movements somehow coordinated as they pursued me through the darkened hospital. I rounded the corner toward the administrative office, fumbling with my keys as I ran. I could hear them getting closer. The squeak of fake Patricia's utility cart, the soft footfalls of the child, the measured pace of the doctor and something else. A strange rustling sound that must have been coming from the nurse. When I reached the administrative office, I jammed the key into the lock, twisted it, and practically fell inside. I slammed the door shut behind me, turned the deadbolt, and dragged the metal filing cabinet in front of it for good measure. My hand shook so badly I nearly dropped my phone as I pulled it out. I hit Harris's number on my contacts and pressed the phone to my ear, breathing hard. He answered on the second ring. "Daniel, what is wrong?" His voice was thick with sleep. "They are all out there," I gasped. "All of them at once. Fake Patricia, the child, the doctor, and the nurse. They are all together, moving together." There was a moment of silence. Then I heard rustling like Harris was sitting up in bed. When he spoke again, his voice had changed completely, tight with panic. "That is not possible. They never gathered together, never. Something is terribly wrong." "What do I do?" I asked, my voice cracking as I backed away from the door. "This is not in any of the protocols." "You must have broken something," Harris said, his words coming faster now. "Not one of the written protocols, but something else." "Did you do anything different tonight?" "Anything at all?" I swallowed hard, thinking about the basement. I found a door open. The basement access entrance. I went inside. "You what?" Harris's voice exploded through the phone. "Jesus Christ, Daniel. You went into the basement. What? What is it?" I pressed my back against the far wall, staring at the office door. I could hear something scratching at it now. "That is their sanctuary," Harris said, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. "You disturbed their sanctuary. That is the one place we never go, ever." I did not know. "There is nothing in the protocols about it." "Because it is unwritten. Some things I just assumed nobody would be stupid enough to do." Harris took a deep breath. Listen to me. This is bad, really bad. What are they? What do they want? I asked. There was a long pause before Harris answered. I have been feeding them information about the new guards. That is why I give out the protocols, to keep them satisfied. They need to know who is in their territory. The door to the administrative office shuddered as something slammed against it. The filing cabinet scraped a few inches across the floor. What do you mean feeding them information? I demanded. They select people to join them. Harris's voice was barely audible now. That is what they do. A cold realization washed over me as I remembered what I had seen in the basement. The shrine. All those security badges. Jennifer Williams, Robert Chen, Marcus Anderson, you told me they quit. They did, in a way, Harris said quietly. Oh my God, I whispered, the truth hitting me like a physical blow. The missing guards, they became the entities. They are the ones haunting the hospital. The door shook violently now, the hinges starting to pull from the frame. I glanced at the security monitors and felt my blood freeze in my veins. On the screens, I could see all 4 entities outside the door. But they were changing. The fake Patricia's face was stretching, her mouth opening impossibly wide. The child's form was flickering in and out of existence. The doctor's white coat seemed to be melting into his skin as his eyes grew larger and more reflective. The nurse's pale face was cracking like porcelain. They are transforming, I said, my voice barely a whisper. Harris, they are turning into something else. Something worse. They are preparing, Harris said. For you. I looked around the office desperately, searching for anything that might help me. My eyes fell on Harris's desk, the bottom drawer slightly ajar. I had never seen it open before. I pulled it open fully and found an old leather-bound journal wedged at the back. I grabbed it and flipped it open. Scanning the yellowed pages covered in tight, cramped handwriting. There is a journal here, I told Harris. In your desk. The original facility director's journal, Harris said. I never had the guts to try what is in there. I flipped through the pages frantically until a passage caught my eye. To banish the entities, their anchor to this world must be destroyed. Burn the shrine and seal the basement door with salt. The fire disrupts their connection. The salt prevents their return. The door splintered as one of the hinges tore free from the wall. I know how to stop them, I said. I need to burn the shrine and seal the door with salt. You will never make it to the basement, Harris said. They will be guarding it now. I have to try. I looked around the office and spotted the fire extinguisher on the wall. Not ideal for starting a fire, but I had my lighter. I need salt. Is there any in the hospital? Cafeteria, Harris said immediately. The kitchen keeps large containers of it. The door buckled inward as the filing cabinet slid further across the floor. I had minutes, maybe seconds. I am going to make a run for it, I said, grabbing the fire extinguisher from the wall. If I do not make it, just go, Harris said. And Daniel. I'm sorry. I hung up and pocketed the phone, gripping the fire extinguisher in both hands. I took a deep breath, then charged at the door, swinging the extinguisher like a battering ram. The weakened door burst outward, knocking back whatever was on the other side. I did not stop to look. I sprinted past the entities, heading straight for the cafeteria. Behind me, I heard inhuman shrieks and the sound of pursuit. I ran faster than I had ever run in my life, my lungs burning as I pushed myself to the limit. The cafeteria was just ahead. I vaulted over the counter into the kitchen area, frantically searching the shelves until I found what I needed. 3 large containers of salt. I stuffed them into my pockets and turned to face the approaching entities. They were closing in from all sides, their forms now barely recognizable as humanoid. I had one chance. I had to make it to the basement. I took a deep breath, tightened my grip on the fire extinguisher, and charged toward the nearest gap between them, running straight for the basement door and what I hoped would be the end of this nightmare. I ran through the hospital, fire extinguisher clutched tightly in my hands, the containers of salt banging against my legs and my pockets. The entities were closing in from all sides, their forms now barely recognizable as human. I spotted a narrow gap between the child and the nurse and charged toward it, my lungs burning with each desperate breath. I dodged past their reaching limbs, feeling something cold brush against my arm as I broke through their circle. The basement door loomed ahead. I slammed my shoulder into it, nearly losing my balance as it swung open. The concrete staircase stretched before me, descending downward into darkness. I stumbled forward, the echoes of inhuman shrieks following me as I descended deeper into the basement. My flashlight beam bounced wildly off the walls as I ran, illuminating those strange rust-colored symbols that now seemed to pulse with malevolent energy. I rounded the corner, my heart hammering against my ribs, and there it was. The shrine built into the wall alcove. I skidded to a stop, my breath catching as I saw what was new among the collection of badges. Harris's security badge now sat at the center of the semicircle, looking freshly placed. The realization hit me like a physical blow. He never went on vacation, I whispered to myself, the truth dawning with sickening clarity. The entities already took him. The badges seemed to watch me. Jennifer Williams, Robert Chen, Marcus Anderson, and now Harris, all of them trapped, transformed into the horrors that stalked the hospital at night. I set down the fire extinguisher and frantically searched the nearby shelves where maintenance supplies were stored. I found what I needed, a bottle of industrial cleaner and a can of lubricant spray, both flammable. I grabbed them and hurried back to the shrine. The sounds from above grew louder. They were coming. My hands shook as I unscrewed the caps and doused the shrine, soaking the badges, dried flowers, and candles. I pulled out my lighter, a cheap plastic one I kept for emergencies, and flicked it several times before a flame finally caught. "This ends now," I said, touching the flame to the edge of the shrine. The fire caught instantly, blue-orange flames leaping up to consume the badges. A chorus of inhuman shrieks echoed throughout the hospital, so loud I had to cover one ear while still holding the lighter. The sound was like nothing I'd ever heard. Pain and rage and something else, something ancient being torn away. I backed away from the growing flames and pulled the salt containers from my pockets. My hands were shaking so badly I spilled some as I unscrewed the first cap. I poured a thick line of salt across the doorway of the basement, making sure the line was unbroken from wall to wall. The entities appeared at the basement entrance just as I finished the salt line. All four of them crowded together. The fake Patricia with her impossibly stretched face, the child with empty flickering eyes, the doctor with his reflective animal gaze, the nurse with her cracking porcelain skin. They pressed forward but stopped abruptly at the salt line. Unable to cross, I backed away, watching as the flames from the shrine grew higher. The badges were melting, curling in on themselves as they burned. The entities began to change before my eyes. Their forms wavered like heat mirages, becoming less solid with each passing second. The fake Patricia was the first to start dissolving, her stretched face collapsing inward as her body turned to wispy gray mist. The child followed, its flickering form simply fading away into nothing. The doctor's white coat seemed to evaporate as his form dissipated like smoke. The nurse was the last, her cracking face shattering into fragments that dissolved before hitting the ground. I stayed there watching until nothing remained but empty air where they had stood. The fire behind me eventually burned itself out, leaving nothing but charred remains of the shrine. I sat with my back against the wall, exhausted beyond words, and waited for morning to come. When the first hospital employees arrived, they found me asleep in the administrative office, slumped over the desk. I must have made my way back there sometime before dawn. The basement door was closed and locked, the salt line undisturbed. I handed in my resignation that same day, ignoring the confused looks and questions about what had happened to the office door. 4 months passed. I found a new job at a warehouse across town, day shift only, and was starting to sleep through the night again without nightmares. Then my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. "Hello," I answered. "Is this Daniel Foster?" A young woman's voice asked. "This is Sarah Mitchell. I am the new night security officer at Riverside Medical Center. I found your number in the employee records." My blood went cold. "What do you want?" "It is about these protocols Harris left for me," Sarah said, her voice uncertain. "They seem really strange, like ignore anyone who looks like Patricia Hayes after midnight, and something about phones in the records room. I thought it might be some kind of joke for new employees." "Quit," I said immediately, my voice urgent. "Quit right now. Do not go back for another shift." "What? I do not understand." I heard it then, a faint squeaking sound coming through the phone, like wheels on a utility cart rolling across linoleum. Sarah, get out of there now," I shouted. The line went dead. I tried calling back 3 times, but each call went straight to voicemail. I sat there holding my phone, a familiar dread settling over me. The cycle had started again with a new victim caught in the hospital's supernatural trap. I stared at my phone screen, Sarah's number still displayed. My hands were shaking. I knew exactly what was happening to her right now. She was seeing the fake Patricia for the first time, probably convinced it was just an elaborate joke, or maybe she had already encountered something worse, something that had made her drop her phone. I should call the police, but what would I tell them? That a hospital was haunted by supernatural entities that transformed security guards into monsters. They would think I was insane. I had no proof, no evidence, just a burned shrine in a basement and my own traumatic memories. I thought about driving back to Riverside Medical Center, bursting through the doors and dragging Sarah out before it was too late. But I knew the truth. The entities would be expecting that. They would be waiting. And if I went back, I would just become another badge in a rebuilt shrine. Another entity stalking the corridors after midnight. My phone buzzed with a text message. Unknown number. Why did you burn our home? My blood turned to ice. I dropped the phone on my couch and backed away from it. Another buzz. Another message. We had to start over. Find a new vessel. Sarah is perfect. I grabbed my phone and blocked the number with trembling fingers, but deep down I knew it would not matter. They had found me once. They could find me again. I had destroyed their shrine, broken their cycle. But I had not destroyed them. Not really. I had only delayed them, forced them to rebuild, and now they were doing it again with Sarah as their next victim. The guilt weighed on me like a physical thing. I could have warned future guards. Could have left a note, destroyed the protocols, burned the entire basement. But I had just run, saved myself, and left the door open for the next person. My phone buzzed again. Against my better judgment, I looked at the screen. A photo. Sarah's security badge, already arranged on a concrete floor with candles around it. The shrine was being rebuilt. I threw my phone across the room and sank onto my couch, head in my hands. The cycle continued. It always would. Riverside Medical Center would always need night security. There would always be someone desperate enough for a job, someone who would ignore the warnings, someone who would make a mistake. And the entities would always be there, waiting in the darkness, following their protocols, selecting their victims. I had escaped, but I would never truly be free, because I knew the truth. And knowing meant I would spend the rest of my life wondering about every new guard who took that shift, wondering if they would survive, wondering if they would end up like Harris, like Patricia, like all the others whose names I had seen on those badges. The hospital had let me go, but it had taken something from me in return. My peace, my innocence, my ability to ever feel truly safe again. Somewhere across town, in the empty corridors of Riverside Medical Center, Sarah was learning the same lesson I had learned. That some jobs come with a price far higher than the paycheck. That some places are hungry. That some protocols exist for reasons beyond human understanding. And that once you enter their world, you never really leave. I turned off all the lights in my apartment and sat in the darkness, listening to the silence, waiting for morning to come. Just like I had done in that hospital basement 4 months ago. Just like I would probably do for the rest of my life, the cycle continued. It always would.